The moment the leather-bound bill folder landed on the polished marble table, I knew this was it. My final test. The crystal chandeliers above sparkled, casting sharp glimmers across the sea of designer dresses and tailored tuxedos. Laughter echoed through Le Montagne's grand ballroom as champagne flutes clinked, but underneath that glittering surface a familiar tension simmered inside me. This night wasn't about celebrating my in-laws' 40th anniversary. It was about control. It was always about control. Victoria, my mother-in-law, flashed that sugar-coated smile of hers, the one that never quite reached her cold blue eyes. She leaned slightly toward me, voice syrupy sweet, yet cutting like a blade. "Oh dear, Ashley, I'm so terribly embarrassed. It seems we've forgotten our wallet. Again." Her perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her chest in mock distress. The table burst into polite chuckles as if they were all in on some private joke, as though watching me being cornered was their evening's entertainment. Nathan, my husband, or rather, the man who was supposed to be my partner, sat beside me sipping his vintage Bordeaux with a vacant expression, as if none of this concerned him. His silence was deafening, just like every other time. 8 years. 8 long years of bending over backward to please this family. 8 years of paying for their lavish vacations, their grandchildren's private schooling, their Aspen ski trips, and Hampton's yacht parties. 8 years of sacrificing my own dreams, while they called it helping the family. But tonight was different. Beneath the surface of my calm exterior, my heart pounded not from fear but from anticipation. My fingers brushed against the thick dossier in my handbag, the evidence I had gathered meticulously documented down to the last dollar. This time, they would hear the truth. This time, the game would end. If you've ever been underestimated, cornered, or used by the very people who were supposed to love and protect you, stay right here. Because tonight, everything changes. Ashley Mitchell was not born into wealth, nor into stability. Raised in a modest suburb of Des Moines, Iowa, her childhood was a string of disappointments, abandonment, and endless conflict between her parents that eventually dissolved into a bitter divorce by the time she turned 11. She remembered nights hiding under her blanket, clutching her ears to muffle the screaming downstairs, and days pretending at school that everything was perfectly normal. But nothing about her childhood was normal. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner to make ends meet. Her father remarried within months, disappearing into a new life that barely included her. From a very young age, Ashley learned one thing: if she wanted safety, stability, and dignity, she'd have to build it for herself. Driven by that survival instinct, she excelled in school. Scholarships carried her to college, where she graduated top of her class with a degree in financial management. She was offered a junior analyst role at a Wall Street investment firm before even crossing the graduation stage. By the age of 28, she had climbed into the ranks of senior financial director, earning more than she had ever dared to dream. And then she met Nathan. Nathan Williams was everything her childhood lacked: charming, kind, considerate, at least at first glance. Tall, with warm hazel eyes, a confident but gentle voice, and the perfect image of upper-middle-class privilege. He came from money, but never flaunted it. Or so she thought. Their romance was a whirlwind. Within 2 years, they were married in a stunning ceremony at his family's estate in upstate New York, hosted, of course, by Victoria and Charles Williams. Victoria, Nathan's mother, welcomed Ashley with open arms, or so it appeared. "Oh, darling, we're so thrilled. Nathan found such a strong, independent woman," Victoria had said that night, her manicured hand squeezing Ashley's shoulder tightly. But beneath her sweet smile was something else, something calculated. Ashley was so desperate for family acceptance that she ignored the first signs. The Williams family presented themselves as an American success story. Charles, the patriarch, had inherited a successful legal consultancy firm, now retired, and spending most of his days at golf clubs and charity events. Victoria played the role of society matriarch, hosting galas, charity auctions, garden parties, and appearing in country club magazines with curated perfection. And Nathan, well, Nathan drifted comfortably through life working a cushy management role at one of the family's businesses. At first, Ashley admired their polished lifestyle. The sprawling estate with its 6 bedrooms and home theater, the weekends spent at the family's beach house in the Hamptons. The private ski trips to Aspen each winter, it was everything she never had. And she thought she was being welcomed into it. What she didn't see, not yet, was how deeply entrenched the Williams family were in maintaining appearances, and how they fully expected her to fund those appearances once they realized just how successful she truly was. At first, the requests were subtle. "Oh, Ashley, you're so brilliant with finances. You wouldn't mind helping Nathan manage the household bills, would you?" Victoria had asked sweetly just weeks after their honeymoon. "He's hopeless with numbers. Always has been." Ashley didn't hesitate. It felt natural to take the lead on budgeting and expenses. After all, she'd been managing her own finances since she was 16. And truthfully, it gave her a sense of control, a safety net in this new glittering world she'd entered. At first, it was just the household utilities, property taxes, and occasional home repairs. But slowly, quietly, it began to shift. The first big family trip came only 6 months into the marriage, a luxury cruise through the Mediterranean for Charles and Victoria's anniversary. Victoria approached Ashley privately. "I hate to even bring this up, dear," she whispered conspiratorially over afternoon tea. "But Charles and I are a little stretched this quarter, what with the roof repairs at the lake house and the renovations on Nathan's old room. And Nathan mentioned how generous your bonuses have been this year. Would you mind covering the cruise? Just this once." Ashley hesitated. She could afford it easily. And part of her still wanted so badly to please them, to cement her place in this family. "Of course, Victoria," she smiled. "It's a special occasion." They toasted to her generosity. But of course, it wasn't just once. The trips became more frequent: Hawaii the following winter, Aspen that Christmas, the Bahamas over spring break. And somehow, Ashley always found herself paying for the suites, the flights, the private chefs, the excursions. At every family gathering, the compliments flowed on Ashley's taste, on her career, on how fortunate Nathan was to have married such a capable woman. But beneath those compliments lurked something darker: expectation. Victoria perfected her brand of passive manipulation. "You're so successful, Ashley. We're proud of you, really," she would say, her hand brushing Ashley's arm during one of the many charity luncheons. "And of course, dear, it's only natural for you to contribute a little more than the rest of us. After all, Nathan's career doesn't compare to yours. And family takes care of each other, doesn't it?" Nathan has always said nothing. In private, Ashley tried to talk to him. "Do you realize how much I've been spending on your family?" she asked one night after transferring yet another 5-figure amount to cover a surprise renovation project for Victoria's country club membership lounge. Nathan shrugged. "Babe, they've done so much for me growing up. It's not like they're asking for anything crazy. You're better at handling money anyway. I don't even understand half of what you do at work." That answer cut deeper than Ashley could admit. Nathan was comfortable letting her shoulder the financial burden, not out of malice, but out of laziness, out of habit, and out of an upbringing that had never forced him to take responsibility. By year 3 of their marriage, Ashley realized she was single-handedly funding not just their household, but a portion of the extended Williams empire. Her salary bonuses and stock options poured into new kitchen remodels for the estate, a fully paid Ivy League tuition for Nathan's niece, and even a vintage Jaguar for Charles's birthday, all under the guise of family contributions. Victoria's manipulation became bolder over time. "You wouldn't want Nathan's father to feel embarrassed driving that old car, would you? After all, his colleagues are always asking about your success." Or, "Ashley, dear, the twins need a proper education. We know you value investing in the next generation. And truly, what's a couple $100,000 for someone like you? Ashley's resentment grew in silence. She started avoiding her own personal purchases, skipping vacations with her friends, passing on spa weekends she used to love, holding off on buying the downtown Manhattan apartment she'd dreamed about. Instead, every dollar went to maintaining the illusion of the Williams' perfect family image. And yet, despite everything she gave, it was never enough. The Williams' social circles praised Ashley, of course, but never for her career, only for how generous she was. How lucky she was to have married into such a refined family. At galas and charity auctions, Victoria introduced Ashley as our wonderful daughter-in-law who's such a blessing to our family. Ashley would smile, nod, sip her champagne, and feel the invisible chains tightening around her wrists. By year 5, Ashley's personal savings account, once thriving, had dwindled to nearly nothing. She was still earning more than most people dreamed, but every dollar was already spoken for before it hit her account. Every time she tried to have an honest conversation with Nathan, he brushed her off. "You're overthinking this, Ash. They love you. We're family. Money comes and goes." But it wasn't love. Not real love. And Ashley was finally beginning to see that. Her breaking point came when Victoria approached her with a new request, one Ashley could no longer ignore. It was during the spring of their 6th year of marriage when Victoria delivered the blow that finally cracked Ashley's restraint. They were seated in the Williams' sun-drenched conservatory, surrounded by exotic orchids and imported Italian furniture, sipping Earl Grey, served by a uniformed housekeeper. Victoria leaned forward with that familiar smile, polished, rehearsed, almost regal in its artificial warmth. "Ashley, darling, I hope you don't mind me bringing up a little matter of family well-being." She began, her voice dropping into that soft, conspiratorial tone that always made Ashley tense. Ashley placed her cup gently on the saucer. "Of course, Victoria. What's on your mind?" "Well, as you know, Nathan's cousin Oliver has had a bit of a rough time since his tech startup collapsed," she said, sighing dramatically. "And poor Fiona. You remember Fiona is pregnant again with twins this time. Quite unexpected." Ashley nodded, her stomach already tightening. She could feel where this was going. "So naturally, Charles and I want to ensure the family remains stable and supported." Victoria continued, placing her perfectly manicured hand on Ashley's knee. "And frankly, dear, you're in the best position to help facilitate that." Ashley's throat tightened. "Facilitate? How?" "The family trust," Victoria said sweetly. "We've spoken to our estate planner. If you could contribute, say, $2.5 million into the trust, we can secure homes for both Oliver and Fiona's growing family. It's really just reallocating a portion of your bonuses. It's not as if you'll even feel the difference." Ashley stared at her, completely dumbfounded. The audacity was staggering. "I'm sorry, Victoria," she said, forcing her voice to remain even. $2.5 million. Victoria waved her hand lightly as if Ashley had misunderstood. "It's for the good of the family, Ashley, and frankly, with your earnings and investments, you're uniquely positioned to help." Ashley's heart pounded as a cold rage began to pool in her chest. "Have you discussed this with Nathan?" Victoria smiled again. "Oh, sweet girl. Nathan leaves these matters to me. He knows I always have the family's best interests at heart. He trusts my judgment, as should you." Ashley clenched her jaw. There it was again, that deeply ingrained dynamic she had allowed to continue for far too long, the subtle erasure of her autonomy masked as family care. And Nathan remained willfully blind to his mother's manipulations. When Ashley brought it up to Nathan that evening, he barely looked up from his iPad. $2.5 million, Nathan, she repeated firmly. "They want me to contribute that much to a trust for your cousins." He frowned slightly, as if mildly inconvenienced. "I mean, babe, it's a lot. But you know my mom probably means well. I mean, they've always taken care of me growing up, and they're just trying to support everyone." "That's not the point," Ashley said, her voice tightening. "This isn't about generosity anymore. It's entitlement." Nathan exhaled, setting his tablet down at last. "Ashley, you make more than my entire family combined. You've said yourself you don't even spend most of your income. What's the big deal? The big deal, Ashley said, her voice rising, is that this has never been about helping when needed. It's become expected. You, your family, you all act like my money belongs to everyone but me. Nathan rubbed his temples, the conversation clearly exhausting him. Ash, you're blowing this out of proportion. No, Nathan. I've let this go on for years and it's only gotten worse. I've drained my savings, stalled my own goals, and twisted myself into knots to keep up with your family's insatiable appetite for more. And you never once stood up for me. He looked at her. Finally really looked, and for a brief moment Ashley saw something in his expression, shame perhaps, or maybe just discomfort. But it passed quickly. They're my family, Ashley, he whispered. And I'm your wife, she whispered back. That night, lying awake beside her sleeping husband, Ashley knew something fundamental had shifted inside her. The resentment she had suppressed for so long had reached a boiling point. She could no longer justify the quiet sacrifices. She could no longer pretend that this was a loving family trying to support one another. It was exploitation, polished, passive, and masked under the illusion of family loyalty, but exploitation nonetheless. For the first time, Ashley allowed herself to think what had once been unthinkable. This marriage, this family, was draining her very soul, and she was done allowing it. Ashley wasn't impulsive by nature. Every major success in her career had come from careful planning, analysis, and timing, and if she was going to reclaim her autonomy from the Williams family, it would require nothing less. In the weeks following Victoria's outrageous request for millions, Ashley quietly began preparing. Her first step was simple but essential. She called in her most trusted financial advisor, Daniel Keller, a brilliant strategist who had helped manage her portfolio since her first major promotion years earlier. Daniel, she said during their private lunch meeting at an inconspicuous bistro far from her usual Manhattan haunts, I need to make some significant financial adjustments. Quietly. Daniel raised an eyebrow. We talking defensive or offensive? Ashley smiled faintly. Both. Over 2 hours she laid everything bare for Daniel. The unchecked financial drain, the family pressure, the manipulation disguised as loyalty. She even disclosed the recent demand for the $2.5 million contribution to the family trust. Daniel listened carefully, taking meticulous notes. When she finished, he leaned back. I've seen plenty of greedy in-laws before, Ashley, but this is surgical, systematic. They know exactly where your limits are, or think they do. Ashley nodded. That's where they're wrong. I've let them believe I would never push back. That ends now. They spent the next few days restructuring Ashley's financial profile. She redirected several liquid assets into newly established private holding companies, registered discreetly, offshore, fully legal, fully protected. Trusts were set up under her control for her own long-term interests. She severed all remaining joint accounts with Nathan, quietly transferring her individual funds into secure private accounts that no one could access or monitor. Her investments diversified further into commercial real estate, foreign markets, and private equity funds that would remain largely invisible to anyone prying into her day-to-day financial records. Next came the documentation phase. Ashley went through years of records receipts for vacations, invoices from the home renovations bank, transfers for the college funds, even credit card statements where Victoria had borrowed her cards for high-end shopping sprees under the guise of preparing for family events. Every dinner, every birthday party, every extravagant holiday she'd funded was documented and categorized. Daniel's office compiled it into a single comprehensive report over 350 pages long. It's not just about proving how much they've taken, Daniel advised. It's about clarity for you. Ashley nodded. Clarity is exactly what I need. She reviewed each page personally. As painful as it was to relive the endless bleeding of her resources, each entry hardened her resolve. By the end of it, the report revealed a staggering total $7.4 million siphoned from Ashley's account since the beginning of her marriage. $7.4 Million. The number sat on the page like a living thing, undeniable, monstrous, and obscene. And none of it included the most recent $2.5 million they now had the audacity to request. Ashley sat silently in Daniel's office as she stared at the final summary. The weight of it all threatened to crush her chest for a moment, but she inhaled deeply, letting the air settle her nerves. "I let them build this narrative," she whispered. "They made me believe I was part of the family, that I owed it to them, that this was love." Daniel placed a firm hand on the table. "It's not love, Ashley. It's exploitation. And you're finally waking them up." She straightened her back. "Now I need to decide how public I make this wake-up call." Daniel smiled thinly. "You've got the ammunition. The only question is, how hard do you want to pull the trigger?" Ashley stared at the massive report for a long beat before answering. "I want them to feel it, Daniel. Not out of vengeance, but because this is the only language they've ever understood." But Ashley didn't stop with her finances. In parallel, she started working with a high-powered divorce attorney, Rachel Stein, a woman known in New York legal circles as one of the most ruthless protectors of high-net-worth women. During their first consultation, Rachel listened carefully as Ashley laid out the history. She barely blinked as Ashley described Victoria's subtle domination, Nathan's passive complicity, and the steady siphoning of her wealth. When Ashley finally paused, Rachel folded her hands and smiled. "This isn't a divorce case, Ashley. This is a financial hostage negotiation." Ashley chuckled softly. "I guess that's one way to put it." Rachel leaned in. "You've got leverage most women in your position never have. You've documented everything. You're the sole primary earner. There are no joint children, no true co-ownership of assets. Legally speaking, you've been their ATM for 7 years. And now we take that narrative away from them." Ashley exhaled, feeling a strange sense of relief for the first time in months. "We're not quite there yet," she added. "I still have one more move to make before we drop the hammer." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "The public reveal?" Ashley's expression hardened. "Their anniversary party, next month, in front of everyone." Rachel's eyes gleamed. "Now you're thinking like a strategist." For the next several weeks, Ashley maintained appearances. She attended Sunday family brunches, smiled politely at charity luncheons with Victoria, posed for photos at the country club. Nathan remained as oblivious as ever, comforting himself with the idea that Ashley was cooling off. Victoria remained smug, believing she had weathered Ashley's momentary objections, convinced Ashley would ultimately cave, just as she always had. But behind the scenes, Ashley was orchestrating her counterstrike, and the stage would be set at Victoria and Charles's 40th wedding anniversary gala. A perfect public setting, a perfect audience, a perfect ending. The ballroom at the Lexington Grand was breathtaking that night. Glittering crystal chandeliers bathed the room in a golden hue. Elegant floral centerpieces adorned each table, while a string quartet played soft classical melodies in the background. The Williams family spared no expense for Charles and Victoria's 40th wedding anniversary gala. Ashley arrived alone, deliberately timed to enter after most guests had already gathered. Heads turned as she walked in wearing a sleek black Alexander McQueen gown that seemed to announce, "I am no longer playing your game." Nathan approached first, beaming with oblivious warmth, as if nothing was brewing under the surface. "You look incredible, babe," he whispered. "I knew you'd come around." Ashley smiled thinly, her eyes briefly scanning the room. "Of course, Nathan. I wouldn't miss this for the world." The entire New York social elite was here. Hedge fund managers, state senators, society columnists, even members of the museum board Ashley herself sat on. Which was exactly why she had chosen tonight. Victoria made her grand entrance from the far end of the room, her emerald silk gown glistening under the lights. She greeted guests like royalty, pausing for photographs and graciously accepting compliments. When her eyes landed on Ashley, Victoria glided over with her usual theatrical poise. "Oh, Ashley dear, I'm so glad you made it. And so punctual for once." Ashley simply smiled. "You know me. Always dependable." Victoria's lips curled into a familiar condescending smirk. "Indeed you are." The dinner progressed with the usual performances, champagne toasts, rehearsed speeches about family unity, and exaggerated tales of Victoria and Charles's sacrifices for the greater good of the Williams clan. Ashley sat through it all biding her time. The moment finally arrived during the presentation of gifts. One by one, relatives and business associates presented lavish offerings, rare artworks, custom jewelry donations in the family's name. Then Nathan, with his usual boyish charm, stood and said, "And of course, none of this would be possible without Ashley's incredible generosity to this family over the years." The crowd clapped politely. Ashley rose from her chair. Her voice was calm, steady, but carried enough weight to immediately silence the chatter in the room. "Actually, if I may take just a moment." All heads turned. The musicians froze. Even Victoria's smile briefly faltered. Ashley stepped forward, a small leather binder in hand. "I want to share a gift of my own tonight," she continued. "Not diamonds or paintings or vacations, but something far more precious, the truth." An uncomfortable ripple spread through the audience. Victoria's face stiffened into a controlled mask. Nathan looked at her in mild confusion. Charles squirmed in his chair. "For the past 7 years, I have contributed to this family in ways most of you probably don't even realize," Ashley said, opening the binder and holding up the first page, a color-coded spreadsheet projected onto the ballroom's large video screen behind her. There, in bold figures, was a staggering total, $7,438,650. Gasps echoed around the room. "These are the documented financial contributions I've made directly into the Williams family's lifestyle. Trips, renovations, tuition vehicles, country club fees, jewelry, medical treatments, even spa retreats." Her voice never wavered. "I did these things quietly, believing I was building a family based on love and mutual respect, believing we were partners. But what I've come to realize painfully is that this was never a partnership." She glanced toward Victoria, whose face had drained of all color. The matriarch clutched her champagne glass tightly, visibly trembling. "This has been exploitation, systematic, entitled, enabled not just by Victoria's manipulations but also by Nathan's silence." A stunned hush swept the ballroom. "I was made to believe that my success obligated me to fund this family's excesses, while my own personal dreams were deferred. But tonight, that ends." Ashley reached for a final set of documents signed legal filings. "I have severed all joint financial accounts, placed my assets under legal protection, and initiated divorce proceedings as of this week." Now even Nathan's face finally cracked, his jaw falling open. "Wait. Ashley?" She cut him off with a glance sharper than any raised voice. "Nathan, you had countless chances to stand beside me, to say, 'Enough.' You chose silence, and by doing so, you chose them." The crowd, now frozen, watched as Ashley turned once more to the audience. "To every woman who has ever been guilted, manipulated, or shamed into surrendering her autonomy for family unity, know this: you do not owe your life, your wealth, or your soul to anyone who cannot honor your sacrifices." Her final words rang like a gavel, striking. "I came into this family hoping to build something beautiful, but you cannot build a future on quicksand. Tonight, I walk away free." Ashley stepped away from the microphone. For a beat, no one moved. Then slowly, applause began, first from a few stunned onlookers, then building into a quiet but unmistakable wave of support from many in the room. Not everyone, of course, but enough. Victoria collapsed into her chair, her carefully curated public image cracking beyond repair. Nathan stood frozen, his entire world spinning as the gravity of Ashley's decision finally sank in. And Ashley. She walked out of the ballroom with her head-high heels clicking against the marble floor as dozens of powerful eyes followed. This was no breakdown. This was liberation. The days that followed the Williams anniversary gala were a hurricane. It took less than 24 hours for word of Ashley's dramatic public confrontation to spread far beyond the ballroom. Gossip columns, finance blogs, even high society social media pages were flooded with whispers about the wife who exposed the family fortune she'd been forced to bankroll. Victoria, who once meticulously curated her family's perfect image, now found herself humiliated in ways she never imagined. Her usual allies at the country club grew distant, wary of being associated with such scandal. Invitations to charity boards were quietly rescinded. The phone calls that once flooded in offering partnerships and praise now grew eerily silent. Nathan, meanwhile, spiraled into a deep fog of shock and confusion. He called, texted, and emailed Ashley repeatedly, desperate to talk privately, desperate to spin the narrative, desperate to reclaim any shred of control. Ashley answered none of them. Instead, she met daily with Rachel Stein and her legal team, finalizing the divorce strategy. The team moved swiftly and with surgical precision. Rachel filed public disclosures documenting the financial exploitation Ashley had endured, a carefully calculated move that further solidified Ashley's legal position while controlling the public narrative. In private meetings with the press carefully vetted and tightly controlled, Ashley shared her story not as a bitter woman seeking revenge, but as a cautionary tale for any spouse trapped in financial manipulation disguised as family loyalty. The response was overwhelming. Her inbox filled with letters from women and some men thanking her for her bravery for voicing what so many had endured in silence. "You've given people like me permission to say enough," one message read. Another woman from Connecticut wrote, "I watched you say what I couldn't say for 15 years. Thank you for showing us that wealth doesn't buy power but clarity does." Ashley realized something profound. Her story was no longer just hers. It had become a symbol of quiet empowerment. Meanwhile, Nathan's financial situation grew increasingly unstable. Without Ashley's income funneling into the family coffers, the Williams' lavish lifestyle quickly began to crumble. The high-end financial advisors who once managed their accounts withdrew quietly when debt surfaced that had long been masked by Ashley's money. Luxury vehicles were quietly sold. Memberships lapsed. Private school tuition for certain family members suddenly came under review. Even Charles, who had always remained quiet in Victoria's shadow, was forced to confront the staggering consequences of their financial dependence. Victoria, however, remained defiant. She hired her own PR crisis manager, attempting to spin the story as a family misunderstanding blown out of proportion. But few bought it. The video of Ashley's poised speech at the anniversary gala had already gone viral. Over 2 million views on YouTube. Tens of thousands of comments. The narrative was no longer controllable. Weeks turned into months. For Ashley, this period became one of profound healing and reinvention. She took a long overdue sabbatical from her executive role and spent several weeks traveling solo, first to Napa Valley, then to Florence, and finally to Kyoto, where she found solace in the quiet discipline of Japanese gardens and tea ceremonies. Each destination stripped away a layer of the weight she had carried for years. One morning, overlooking the Arashiyama bamboo grove in Japan, Ashley journaled a sentence that would later guide her life. "When you remove those who drain you, the world becomes light again." Upon her return to New York, Ashley didn't immediately resume her old career. Instead, she launched something entirely new, a foundation dedicated to financial literacy for women entering marriage or long-term partnerships. She called it the Sovereign Balance Foundation. The goal was simple, yet radical: to educate women on how to retain financial independence within relationships, to recognize red flags early, and to rewrite the outdated narrative that sacrifice equals love. Within its first year, the foundation attracted partnerships from major banks, legal organizations, and women's advocacy groups. What started as a deeply personal battle was now evolving into a movement. Ashley became a highly sought-after speaker, invited to conferences, universities, and women's leadership panels. Her face graced magazine covers not as a socialite or ex-Williams wife, but as a symbol of financial autonomy and quiet power. One evening, nearly 8 months after the infamous gala, Ashley received an unexpected letter. It was handwritten. The handwriting was familiar. "Nathan. Ashley, I've read every interview, I've watched every clip. And every time I'm struck by one thing, you were always braver than I ever deserved. I see it now, too late, of course. You carried us while I looked away. You fought for yourself when I should have fought for you. I let my mother turn me into something weak. And I let you carry that weight alone. I hope you found peace. Nathan. Ashley read the letter twice, then gently folded it and slid it into a drawer. She felt no anger, no satisfaction, no lingering pain, only release. Nathan's apology, though sincere, came far too late, but that wasn't the point anymore. She had built her peace without needing his. Meanwhile, Victoria remained ostracized from much of her former social sphere. Though she still lived in the family estate, it was a shadow of its former grandeur. A few months later, word reached Ashley through mutual acquaintances. The family home had been listed quietly off-market. The Williams name, once synonymous with old money stability, was now a cautionary tale whispered at cocktail parties. But Ashley, she flourished. Her face, once politely tolerated on charity committees, was now spotlighted on Forbes's Women of Influence list. Her Sovereign Balance Foundation expanded into 3 new international markets. Most importantly, she finally lived a life untethered emotionally, financially, and spiritually. She no longer walked into rooms seeking approval. She no longer minimized herself for anyone's comfort. And as she often said during speaking engagements, we are not obligated to bankrupt ourselves financially or emotionally to earn a seat at a table that was never meant to honor us. It was almost poetic how life had come full circle. On a warm spring evening, exactly 1 year after that unforgettable anniversary gala, Ashley stood backstage at the Beacon Leadership Summit preparing to deliver her keynote speech. The room beyond the curtain was packed. CEOs, policymakers, journalists, young professionals, and hundreds of women from every walk of life who had followed her journey. As the host introduced her, a woman who turned personal pain into public power, the applause was thunderous. Ashley stepped forward, heels clicking steadily, shoulders square, head high. She no longer carried the weight of needing to be validated. Her voice, clear and steady, filled the auditorium. 1 year ago, I stood in a ballroom very different from this one. I stood surrounded by people who smiled in public, but quietly drained me behind closed doors. For years, I let loyalty, guilt, and fear convince me that silence was the price of love. That sacrifice was the currency of belonging, that if I just gave a little more eventually, I would be enough to earn their respect. She paused, letting the words settle into the crowd. But here's what I've learned and what I wish someone had told me sooner. You do not owe your dignity for anyone's comfort. You do not have to fund someone else's expectations to prove your worth. And most importantly, silence never earns you protection. It only guarantees your continued sacrifice. The audience leaned in, captivated. There's a dangerous myth we feed women, Ashley continued, that love requires endurance. That loyalty means swallowing your needs. That being good enough means endlessly giving even when it empties you. I lived that myth for years, until one day I simply ran out of myself to give. Her voice softened but carried even more strength. Walking away wasn't easy. Reclaiming my voice wasn't simple. But every single person in this room deserves to understand love is not measured by how much of yourself you erase for others. True love, whether romantic, familial, or professional, is measured by how fully you are allowed to exist as yourself. The applause swelled again, but Ashley raised her hand gently to pause them. I don't tell my story because I'm special. I tell it because I'm not. Because there are millions of women sitting in boardrooms, standing in kitchens, working 2 jobs, or trapped behind golden cages who carry this same invisible weight. And it's time we stop applauding endurance and start normalizing boundaries. The room was silent, charged with emotion. Ashley smiled, closing her speech with the line that had now become her foundation's mantra. You are allowed to say, "This is enough. I choose me." As she stepped back, the standing ovation thundered like a tidal wave. Many in the audience wiped away tears, not from sadness, but from recognition. They saw themselves in Ashley. And perhaps more importantly, they now saw the possibility of release. Later that night, as Ashley stood alone on the hotel balcony overlooking the New York skyline, the city pulsing softly beneath her, she allowed herself a quiet moment of peace. Her phone buzzed with messages, reporters requesting interviews, sponsors offering partnership, supporters expressing gratitude. But she simply silenced the device, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath of the cool spring air. She no longer needed to prove anything. She had built her own life not on borrowed approval or fragile alliances, but on her own terms. And somewhere far behind her, the old world she once tried so hard to belong to Nathan Victoria, their crumbling legacy faded into quiet irrelevance. The real legacy was this one: the courage to choose herself.